The illusion of network effects, how Metcalfe's law is being misapplied in crypto. Flint West reporting. Let's slow this down, because there is something happening across crypto markets that most people sense, but very few are willing to articulate clearly. We are going to separate what people want from what people are forced to touch. And if that distinction is not made, capital keeps flowing into network effects that do not actually exist. Section 1. The two buckets nobody wants to admit exist. Crypto culture tries to pretend that every token has utility. That framing is convenient, because if everything has utility, then nothing has to prove demand. But there is a real split, and it matters. Bucket 1. Tokens acquired for their own sake. People want them even without incentives, emissions, or forced interaction at the user experience level. Bitcoin, because it is scarce, censorship-resistant, a digital bearer asset. Privacy coins, with Monero as the archetype, because privacy itself is the product. Stablecoins like USDT and USDC, because stability is the product. Asset-backed tokens like XAUT and PaxG, because gold is the product. These are end-user demand tokens. The public actually desires them. Bucket 2. Internal coordination tokens. These exist primarily for gas, governance, staking, incentives, or protocol mechanics. They are used by validators, miners, or stakers, DAO voters, protocol insiders, integrators, and yield farmers. And here is the key point. If the end user can consume the service without touching the token is not a consumer asset. It is internal plumbing. That distinction drives everything that follows. Section 2. Forced demand is not demand. This needs to be said cleanly. If a token's demand comes from the idea that you need it to operate the machine, that is not the same thing as people wanting it, because the moment the machine changes, the demand disappears. That is why gas abstraction matters so much. If users can pay fees in stablecoins, if applications sponsor gas, if wallets automatically handle gas behind the scenes, then you need it for gas becomes you used to need it for gas, which means the so-called utility was never real demand. It was a toll booth. Section 3. The phantom value problem. Once this lens is applied, a pattern emerges. Governance tokens that nobody actually uses for governance. Community tokens that are essentially vibes with a ticker. Tokens whose sole purpose is incentives. Tokens that exist because every project is expected to have a token. They are held because insiders receive them early, because emissions push them outward, because narratives keep them afloat. But the token does not sit at the point of consumption. So the value is phantom. It exists because market participants collectively agree to pretend it exists until they stop. And when they stop, price discovery resumes its relationship with gravity. Section 4. Bitensor and the internal coordination archetype. Bitensor is a clean example. TAO is not used by the masses to consume artificial intelligence services. TAO functions more like a special drawing rights unit inside a walled ecosystem, a coordination token used by participants to settle among themselves. Validators, subnet operators, miners, internal actors require it for staking, emissions, ranking flows, and coordination. But the consumer does not want TAO. The consumer wants the output, the model response, the application result, the service. If that consumer can pay using fiat, stablecoins, or an application layer that abstracts TAO away, then TAO is not a consumer token. It is a back-end settlement instrument. And when demand comes from a small internal class, the total addressable market is capped by design. That is not a value judgment. That is arithmetic. Section 5. Governance tokens and the optionality trap. Uniswap is instructive. You do not need the Uni token to swap. You need the base network gas. Aave follows the same pattern. You do not need the AV token to borrow. You deposit collateral and borrow assets. So what are these tokens? They are not products. They are not consumer assets. They are governance overlays attached to successful applications. If the average user never votes, and they do not, then the token is not a necessity, which means demand is primarily driven by speculation, incentive loops, insider positioning, and yield narratives. This is why governance tokens behave like the cousin of gas tokens. They are optional, and optional tokens do not earn network effect valuation. Section 6. Chainlink and internal infrastructure spend. Chainlink appears to be an edge case, but it actually reinforces the framework. Who uses the link token? Not the retail user swapping on a decentralized exchange. Not the borrower clicking through an interface. Link is used by developers, protocols, integrators, and Oracle operators. Demand for Link is closer to business infrastructure spend than consumer adoption. Consumers benefit from Chainlink's existence, but they do not hold the token. That difference is everything. There is utility in the system, but not independent demand for the asset. Crypto repeatedly confuses those two ideas, often deliberately. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 7. The Metcalfe's Law Trap. Now the core error becomes visible. Metcalfe's law says that the value of a network scales roughly with the square of the number of users. More users, more connections, more value. That logic holds only when each new user directly increases the usefulness of the asset being valued, and when adoption translates into direct demand for the thing whose price is being modeled. This is why Metcalfe-style reasoning fits Bitcoin more cleanly. More holders mean more liquidity, more acceptance, more credibility, and more demand. But for internal coordination tokens, the model breaks. The user count being modeled is often a mirage, because the people who actually need the token are validators, stakers, node operators, insiders, and integrators. That is a tiny class. So a network can grow from 1 million users to 100 million users, while the number of people who truly need the token grows from 10,000 to 20,000. That is not a squared growth curve. That is a capped curve being misrepresented as exponential. When Metcalfe's law is applied to governance and gas tokens, one of two things is happening. Either the model is being overfit accidentally, or a narrative is being sold intentionally. In both cases, the outcome is the same: erroneous valuations. Section 8. Ethereum as a case study in lost monetary premium. Ethereum is the most important case study because it once escaped this trap. In 2017, Ethereum was not just a smart contract platform. It was access. If someone wanted to participate in initial coin offerings, they needed ETH. ETH was not just fuel, it was the gateway. Access creates desire. People acquired ETH to participate immediately, to participate later, to front-run future token launches, and to hold exposure to the entire issuance pipeline. That was consumer-driven demand. Then the structure changed. Centralized exchanges proliferated, and they did what exchanges always do. They absorbed the value chain. They created launch pads. They controlled distribution. They concentrated liquidity. They stood up exchange tokens and removed Ethereum from the access path. This created a zero-sum dynamic. Ethereum standardized token issuance, and competitors copied the standard while bypassing the network. Ethereum became a victim of its own success. To defend ETH's premium, the ecosystem had to continuously invent new primitives: decentralized finance, non-fungible tokens, staking, and then came Layer 2 scaling, which introduced the self-cannibalization problem. Layer 2s scale the ecosystem while draining fee capture from the base layer. Even if activity grows, the question becomes whether ETH captures that growth or whether the surrounding layers do. If a token's primary role is gas, and activity migrates to environments where gas is cheaper or abstracted away, the monetary premium decays. The market stops pricing future network effects when the token is no longer the choke point. Section 9. The End-User Demand Test. This framework can be formalized. A token passes the end-user demand test only if at least one of the following is true. First, the token itself is the product. Bitcoin, privacy coins, stablecoins, and asset-backed tokens fall into this category. Second, the end user must hold the token to consume the service in practice, not in theory, and not optionally. Third, if gas abstraction becomes universal, the token would still be demanded. This is the future-proof test. If a token fails these conditions, it is likely an internal coordination instrument, a governance overlay, an incentive mechanism, or a speculative vehicle. Its growth curve is not mass adoption. It is internal participation, and that difference is structural. 10. The pinpoint position. The conclusion can now be stated precisely. Most top 100 crypto tokens do not earn network effect valuation because their demand does not come from end users. They are internal coordination instruments whose addressable market is structurally capped. As a result, Metcalfe-style growth models are widely misapplied. Only a narrow set of assets, including Bitcoin, privacy coins, stablecoins, and asset-backed tokens, exhibit independent and durable end-user demand. 11. The broader implication. The implication is uncomfortable. If the token does not sit where consumer demand exists, then adoption narratives are just narratives. Token prices are not tracking users. They are tracking emission schedules, insider unlocks, staking incentives, speculative reflexivity, and belief. Many tokens do not fail because the technology fails. They fail because the token fails the demand test. A product can succeed while the token becomes dead weight. That distinction is rarely acknowledged, but it explains most long-term underperformance. In closing, network size alone is not impressive. What matters is whether end users want the token or merely tolerate it as a fee. Because in the long run, forced demand is not demand, and markets eventually audit everything. Flint West signing off.